everyone. My name is Graham Charters. I'm your compere for the rest of the day. Welcome to the OSGi community event track for EclipseCon. Starting things off today, we've got Bogdoll and Marian Grigoras. Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
They're from the corporate technology division in Siemens AG. They actually work in the learning systems group. Where they're creating architectures and processes to help their teams create customer solutions. So I'll hand it over to Dieter and Marian.
Thanks, Graham. So in our talk with the very long title, Workflow for Development, Release and Versioning with OSGi and bndtools, we wanted to talk about how to create such a workflow, because we found that there isn't one we could really use. So we talked also a little bit with Neil, and so we had the impression we need to find our own workflow, and we wanted to show how the search for this workflow was for us, and to what solution we came and what problems we found, and so but before we go to the workflow, I wanted to tell a little bit our group, so we can see it in context. We are in a research group in Siemens. We are around 10 people with diverse skills. So we have computer science, we have mathematics, we have all this stuff. Important is that not all people are very deep into the software development. So that's not our main focus. Our focus is to find solutions for our customers, and part of it is to develop software solution for that. The other part is that not all people are working full-time in software development. We have full-time employees, we have part-times, we have students which are there for perhaps some months or some years. And the workflow we want to find should suit all those people. So we need a workflow which is easy to understand, which is easy to implement and to use. And because we only have people which are there for 3 months, it shouldn't be hard for them to learn it in that time, even if they don't work full-time in that time. Also, our team is currently working from one building, but such a workflow should also support groups which are remote, which are working distributed, perhaps in different cities, countries, or even across different time zones. So it's really important that we can work a little bit independent from each other. So, okay, what are we doing? So our customers are other Siemens business units. So we are working for them to help them with solutions based on neural network technologies and other machine learning algorithms. But that's, for the topic here, not that important. Important is that software is only one part of the stuff. When I arrived at Siemens, Legion were told that in the past, a customer was happy if you present some paper which explains how his problem could be solved. So then you hand over the paper, the customer was happy, and all was fine. But it's, as I wrote, paper doesn't cut it anymore for our customers. They want a solution, a software solution, a prototype, which really shows that our solution is working for them. And how we are doing that? Usually we are making first the non-software research. How could we solve the problem via mathematics or other engineering practices? And then when we have the idea, we turn it into software. We make rapid prototyping. But because we want to leverage our experience, we don't want to write each software solution anew. So we are building up some frameworks or some libraries where we store our knowledge and where we store our code. Because we are working with rapid prototyping, this API backward compatibility is not that much in focus. We want to create the next solution for our customer. And what is important is that if you want to pick up a follow-up project with a customer, that you can go somewhere and take the project from 1 year ago out of it, and you can still build it, perhaps with the old version, but you should be able to go back to some older version and are able to still work with it. Our software landscape. We are programming with Java. We are using Eclipse. We store our source codes in multiple S4N repositories. And we are using continuous integration like Jenkins or Hudson to build and test centrally, and also to create some deployable artifacts. Usually we have, we have some major libraries which contain some projects which are often used together. Not all our developers know all the libraries equally good. Usually they are more into one library or the other one. And a solution for us is now a new project which uses several projects, existing ones, or which creates some new modules. So like solution one takes these projects. So even if if the team member which makes this solution isn't very experienced with the library 2, he knows he needs there some module which does the stuff. It is documented, he knows what it does. But he probably doesn't know that the dependencies to other projects. Or even here, he knows I want to have these projects, but I don't know the dependencies, the indirect dependencies. And he shouldn't take care of it. He should, the system should help him there. Or another solution could be cut differently. The important stuff is that the team member which makes this solution knows some projects which he really needs to it, and he doesn't want to care about the other dependencies. I talked about artifact for solution deployment. The result, what we are making is a solution. It is something runnable, which we should send to the customer or bring to the customer and deploy there. And usually we have there a launcher, an OSGi launcher, which just takes a folder where all the libraries is and launches this application. This launcher is usually the same for all applications because it's not specific to the application. Or it could be a batch file or a shell file which just, if we don't use OSGi, which just takes the jar files and make a class path. Then we have the solution-specific configuration. There we have configuration files like log files or other files which are necessary to specify the configuration. So this is one where obviously the people have to manually work on it. So that's something we can't automate. But the next point, that's a really important one. The complete dependency tree of the solution, so all jar files or all bundles which we need for it, that's not something which we want to do manually. We want to point to the solution and then somehow magically through the resolving, we want to collect all jar files, our jar files or our modules or third-party modules into one folder. And these should be automated so that it's less error-prone and that also people who are not software developer can trigger this process. So it's important for us that people, non-developer or people who are not developing that much are able to trigger the creation of such an artifact. For example, in one module which is at the customer side, we've made improvement already, but it's not distributed to the customer because the one who created or changed the module doesn't even know which customer already used this file. But some other guys, some project lead or he knows, okay, their customer are using that file, I want to have a new distribution. So he can trigger it somehow, he can test it then, and then he can give it to the customer. This solution artifact should be created on a CI because if you do it on your local machine and you forget to check in some file or whatever, then it's not repeatable and producible. So it should be on a CI that really can catch up the errors through missing files and similarly errors. Also, it should be archived by CI. I want to know that this version was sent to a customer and I want to get the installation file of this version. And if I do it manually, then probably I forget it if it's getting hectic or if I have not much time. So the requirements for our workflow. I mentioned some, but to make it more explicitly. We want to to enforce modularity. We think that our modules are modular, but only thinking isn't enough. We want to prove it. We want to have a guidance that it's that we don't use accidentally some shortcuts to other modules. And here bndtools with Eclipse, it's helping us because we can't import a package from some other module. We have declaratives to include the other module. And even then, we can't use every package, but only the exported packages. So here we get really help to stay modular. Then, as I said, we are using in the past CI to build, test, and create artifacts, but we also want to continue to do that. We want really to build and test centrally, and we want to create the artifacts we are giving to the customer centrally. And partial checkouts. In the past, before we had such a workflow, if I wanted to to work here, and I was not sure what project dependencies I need, I checked out all the stuff, and perhaps even that one, and all the others. So it was really hard to find all the files and modules you really want to use. What we now want is that I really only pick those modules which I want to change. Only those which I want to adapt, change, or create new should be in my workspace. All other stuff should come from somewhere magically. Marian will go to that. And also these direct and indirect dependencies, I don't want to care for it. Automatic build in Eclipse. We are using Eclipse, and Eclipse is quite nice for development, and it should stay so. I don't want to take care of these building of bundles and whatever. That should happen somehow automatically. Equally important is that the same is we are able to do the same via the command line, because I want to do it automatically. And if I would need to click somewhere in Eclipse, then I can't do it on some CI server, or it would be very hard and fragile. So it's really important that if we make a build from the command line, it should behave as equal as possible than the automatic build in Eclipse. What we then found very useful and don't want to lose anymore is the ability to look at a module and to see what dependencies do we have to other modules. And not just from the source code via imports, but really from the bytecode. So I can really see what dependencies to other modules I have, what classes in my module has these dependencies, and I can evaluate it if these dependencies are really necessary. So we have a chance to cut off some dependencies which are not really necessary. And then tool support for semantic versioning. Neil has yesterday talked about this topic, and he said it, and we think the same. You can't do it correct manually. You need help. You need tool support, and we want that tool support. Especially if you think that some of our team members are not too much into the software development part. So the semantic versioning, I would say it's quite too hard to do it right. And if you don't do it right, we have the problems with the backward compatibility. So here we can break some stuff, but we have a new version, and we can come back to the older versions of modules if we need that, but we can progress with our API. Okay. So for our requirements, we had the impression that OSGi, BND, and bndtools seems to fulfill most of that what we want to have. And in the long term, we want to use all OSGi features because we have a really good use case also for the services. But right now, we wanted to start with the modular layer and then build up on it. And I'm pretty sure that if we have tackled the modularity layer with all the build, then the other ones are doesn't make the workflow more complex. And so perhaps I'm not sure if everybody knows all the tools, the BND. What's BND? For an OSGi bundle, all the meta information about the bundle, what makes the bundle and bundle is stored in the manifest MF. And these manifest MF you usually don't want to maintain manually because you have to enter there much text, you can make errors, you have to write lots of class package names, so it's very easy to make errors. And BND is kind of a tool which helps you to maintain your manifest. You have some config files for the BND file, where you can specify on a higher abstract level what you want to have, and BND is then transforming this information and through bytecode inspection to create this manifest MF file. bndtools now, it's an Eclipse plugin. It's mainly an Eclipse plugin, which helps you to use BND easier, because to use BND, it's not that easy too. And bndtools is now an help for us to use BND better. And with bndtools and BND together, we have also an end task to build and release on a command line. That was also very important for us. And here we have it together. And because it's done by the same guy or the same guys, it's working very close together. So doing a build within Eclipse and doing a build via the end task is, from our perspective, really we get the same end results. So I can debug in Eclipse, and when I'm happy, I can use then the end task on the CI server to create my artifacts. Okay, I think then I will.
Right. Hi everyone. So I have the pleasure now to go into the workflow discussion, but we won't jump directly to what our targeted workflow right now is. I'll just try to just also talk a bit about what we tried to do and why it didn't work out, what were the questions that we had along the path. So the first, so there are several questions that are going to, questions that we spent some time on that we're going to address and see what the discussion on those questions was. And one of the hardest things with such a workflow is actually versioning, because doing semantic versioning, well, there's not so much info on it, how to do it. So Dieter already mentioned that when you were working with BND and bndtools, you're not editing directly the manifest.mf file, but you are giving some directives to BND, mainly instructing BND how to generate your manifest.mf file. And we're talking, I'm going to talk now about this version keyword. You may know that in the manifest.mf file, you have, when you declare your dependencies, you're declaring some, well, I don't know if you use that. Okay. Oh, right. Okay. Right. In the manifest.mf file, you have you can specify an import range for the packages that you want to use, for the bundles that you want to use. Whereas in BND, you have a bit more options. You are able to specify a few directives for the values for the version keyword, where you can instruct BND how to generate those ranges. And there are various values there, like version equals file, snapshot with different meanings, but what is relevant for us now is version latest. So the definition of version latest, when you give BND this directive, whenever you add a bundle to your build path, means that BND should look at the local workspace for any dependencies that you might need before you go to any OBRs or OSGi bundle repositories that you may have defined. So why is this relevant in our case? Imagine you have a project A that depends on B and C, and you have you start working on A and B in your workspace. There is also some version released for all of them in remote in some OBR that you are able to access. And now, what kind of linking would you get? If you do not use version latest, which is the default behavior of BND, then and you're working on A, then whenever you're working, you will basically link to the lowest versions that you get from the OBR. You heard the talk about why you want to use the lowest version at build time and why you want to use the highest version for runtime. What changes if you use version latest for such a dependency? What happens is that first the BND will look in your workspace, and so this means that it will take the B project, if you checked it out from your workspace, use this version, because it's also, in most cases, newer than what's in the OBR. And then pick the rest of the dependencies that cannot be found in the workspace from the repository. So for us, why this is relevant is that it's pretty often in our group that when you're working on a bug correction or a new feature, you're not working on one project alone. Well, the question is why? Probably you haven't divided your code okay, but it happens quite a lot. So meaning that when you're working on something new, you're touching both A and B. So you just check out A and B, you start hacking in B, putting a new method, you want to have this method in A, and suddenly, if you do not use version latest and you link against this version in the OBR, you won't have these changes. So you will be writing something in B which is not available in A. It makes sense from the BND point of view, but it's a bit confusing for the developer. And you have several versions that you could do. You could, for example, release this temporary version of B to some local OBR and link it from there and so on. But everything that we tried was a bit too complex in our environment. So then I decided, okay, it's too annoying for the developers. We will use this version latest, because the expectancy of the developer is whenever I hack something in parallel in several projects, I want to see immediately the changes in the other one. I want to have access to these new methods. Right, so this was the first decision that we made. It's probably the most controversial with our workflow, that we wanted to use this version latest. And another comment is that it might well change once new support is available from the tool, from BND and bndtools. Right, the next discussion is about a developer OBR. We are mainly talking here about repository where we want to deploy all the bundles that we're working on. So bundles that come from our team, not third parties, they are not so relevant here. We want a place where we gather all these bundles, and they also have the meaning that these bundles were deemed by the developer ready for team use. That's the special semantics that we have for this DevOBR. It should contain, well, stable in this sense, that they are ready for team use. They shouldn't contain every single step during the development, every work in progress. Well, and they also, this repository may also include any number of older versions, so you can build against older and newer versions of the same library. And now the question is, how do you access such a DevOBR? There are several options here. You can make it locally. You can put it, for example, in a repository. Well, for us, it's subversion. Don't ask why. You could check it out, link against it locally, and then you will just, well, you will have everything that was available in the DevOBR at the moment that you checked out, and you will link against those, but we'll see what problems come with that. The other option would be linking it somehow remotely. You have it served somewhere, and you access it via HTTP, HTTPS. Well, there's another option. May seem funny. Don't have a DevOBR at all. It's interesting, it may work up to a point, and it was quite similar to what we were doing before. So I'll start with a funnier option. What does it mean if you don't have such a collection of artifacts, of bundles of your development team? It means that once you check out a project A in your workspace and you start working on that, you need to build it, but for this you need some other bundles. You have dependencies on B and C, which you don't have, and there is no place in your system where they reside, because there is no such a DevOBR, so you need to grab the sources. So you check out B and C, and then you notice that C has a dependency on D, so you have to check that out. So the first question on this workflow is, so basically you'll have everything that you need, the whole dependency subtree, you'll have it in your workspace. So how do you know what to check out? Well, Dieter mentioned we don't want to check out everything, but basically you don't know what to check out, and you also don't want to know what to check out. So what we did in practice here was that we said, well, you could check out A because that's what you're interested in, and then you will get some compile errors. And then bndtools will tell you, well, you are not finding these imports from B. And then you can go and check out B. And then he'll try to build B before A, and then B will also not compile because he maybe also has a dependency. And you can traverse your whole dependency subtree this way. It works. It's not nice. The other funny thing that happens is that because you're working, basically you're only having your source repository, you're grabbing most probably the head of your repository for each the dependencies in your subtree. So at a later moment in time, it's almost impossible to reproduce what was the exact context of a particular build. When I built A and I also deployed it to my customer, what was the status of all the other dependencies? There's, well, almost nothing you can do there. You can go maybe in the repository and see what was the state, what was the head at a particular time point in time, but you don't want to do that. So we worked a bit with the DevOBR. It has a nice feature that everything is available in the workspace, but you do not have to. So you do not have to release everything. It's easy to develop on it, but reproducibility is a problem. So then we said, right, network connection error. Okay. So let's go to try to see how this works with a local DevOBR. Meaning that we put our DevOBR in the SVN repository, and whoever wanted to develop checked out this whole OBR on the local machine. They linked it as a file OBR in our case. And they start working, and when they are done, they, of course, commit their source. They commit into the source repository. But that's not enough, because somebody else who does not want to look at their source code just checks out the DevOBR, and they link against that in their workspace. Because at this point, we could just check out only the projects that I'm interested in. So let's say I'm just taking A, and B and C should come from the DevOBR. So whenever I make an update to such a utility library or to B, and I want somebody else to use it, I have to release to my local DevOBR, commit it to the repository so the others can update it on their machines. Of course, you could let the continuous integration make this loop. Once you commit something into the source repository, also let it release into the DevOBR, but all the other users would still have to update their local copies. And that's basically polling, and we also don't like that. There is another issue with this, and that's that implies deployment. Because all the links that you have to the dependencies in the DevOBR are local to your machine, the result of dependency resolving process will contain URLs that are something like file, column, / and so on. So they are local to your developer machine, meaning that if you want to it gets very hard once you commit these results of the resolving. It gets very hard to make that run on another machine, on the continuous integration server or any other dev machine. And this is what, particularly what we didn't like about the solution, that a dev is the only one, the dev that does the resolving on his machine is the only one that can make a deployment for the customer. This led a bit to the fact that in our team, one of the devs became the deployment guy. But we didn't like that because his name wasn't Jenkins. So the side effect, another side effect was you have this guy now, he can do the deployments, it still works. But it's very easy for the guy to say under pressure, well, I'm making a deployment right now, I send something to the customer and continue hacking. But the status that he delivered to the customer is not checked in, is not tagged, is because he's doing it from the local machine, it's too easy to make a mistake and not document what you did there. So we didn't like that either. But we still have the option. We still have the option to make the DevOBR available, served somewhere centrally, and everybody links to that. And we call this the remote DevOBR. And we basically, you can see we like this option. You have all the artifacts in one place. The nice part compared to the local DevOBR is that the CI can deploy something into this repository, and all the other users wouldn't have to update any kind of copy, but they would be able, well, they would automatically get the newest version that was released. We basically also want to only have read-only access for the developers, because we would like them always to go over the source repository. We would like them to go to commit only their source changes and then let the CI run the tests, and if everything is fine, only then only the CI should put something in the DevOBR. Of course, you need some way to, when you make a source commit, you need some way to tell the CI, do I want this commit to go into the source repository or not? But we'll come to that. Right, as I said, probably. Well, there were a couple of, you can imagine we made the choice that we would like for our workflow to work with remote OBRs. That was maybe the second step. The next question was, and it may seem silly now, but we discussed quite a lot about it. When you make a source commit, should you force the developer to increase the bundle version? Well, the original idea for this was you're committing something, it's a different source. Maybe it should have a different version because it's something different from what's already in there. You will have several commits in the source. If you do not do this, you will have several commits in the repository which have the same bundle version. And then the question is, what is the semantics of this? What we decided to do is to what this means if you have several versions is that so you'll have these several commits with 1.0.0 for a particular bundle, and only one of them is really 1.0.0. But which one? Most probably is the first one, and the rest is just work that you are doing on the previously released version. So you're working towards the next version. But you cannot version it before because you don't know, is this going to be a 1.0.1, a 1.1.0, a 2.0? Depends on the work that you still haven't done. So the most logical choice there would be to say, well, I just work on 1.0.0 and it's work in progress for the next version, whichever version that may be. You will get a large number of artifacts if you were to force the users to do this, because every commit would have to be a new version. But the most important thing is, and why it was a no-go for us, is every dev in our team said, well, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be forced to think of a new version whenever I put something in the source repository, because I may have the meaning that a commit to the source repository is not a release for the team. I just want to see if my current work in progress is passes all the tests. As I said, we are only checking out into our workspace what I currently work on. So if I do a change in B, I have no idea if I'm breaking some other projects that somebody might work on. So I want to let the CI do this for me. And this is why I might want to check in just to see if everything's okay with what I did until now. So the answer to this question for us was no, do not force the users to bump the version on each source commit. There's one more question that we discussed a bit on, and this was when the continuous integration releases something to the DevOBR, should we overwrite an existing bundle? You already have the A1.0.0 in there, and you're working on something, and the CI comes and tells the DevOBR, well, I have a new 1.0.0, just put it in. So if whenever you would put something in the source repository with the same version, if the CI builds it, everything is fine, and puts it in the DevOBR, should you accept this or not? And because the default behavior of BND was to not override, was to override the existing thing, was the first thing we tried out. But there were some issues with that, and that's that. Well, basically, the only advantage that you would see there is that the source repository would contain the same thing as the DevOBR. But the big no-go is, in time, you will have in the DevOBR several versions, several artifacts that are basically 1.0.0. So if a customer comes to you and tells, I have a problem, you're looking and he has 1.0.0, then you ask yourself, was it the first 1.0.0, was it the second 1.0.0, which one? So that's definitely, for deployment, that's definitely bad. So we said, okay, we need some way to put into, to let the DevOBR know that we do not overwrite an existing version. Once a particular version of a bundle gets into the DevOBR, that's it forever, and if you want to deploy something new, then you have to bump the version. Right, now to do a short recap on how the system would look like. So I have several dev workspaces. We have our source repository. Right, continuous integration, DevOBR, and so on. So the dev workspaces would use this version latest directive for the BND, meaning that every project that is checked out in the dev workspace has precedence over anything that might be in the OBR. So whenever I work on something here, I must know what I do, that I have, that everything that I checked out is a work in progress, right, sorry. And when I have to commit something, the only way that I can only commit source repository. I don't want to go and put things into the DevOBR. The repository itself would contain work in progress, and continuous integration would just pick any change up and try to release things. If everything is successful here, try to release things to the DevOBR. So, and now it's, after talks also with the BND tools guys, Neil and others, we said it's a functionality that it doesn't really belong into continuous integration, whether I want to release there or not, but it's something that is specific to the DevOBR, and every team might want to do it differently. So for each OBR, you want to have different policies. Right, and as we said, the DevOBR should not override something that was already put in there. So that's our target development workflow. We're still working on that. We're not yet there, but we're still missing a few things. The advantage on this is now that also the continuous integration can access the DevOBR not only to write, but also to read from there, and can do this collection for me. So I can say, if I want to deploy A, then we have an automated AND task that can grab all the dependencies of A, because OSGi has the information, bndtools gives me access to this information, and I get a list of bundles that I should deploy, and this is what then I send to my customer. Okay, I said before that the question is, how do you signal to the CI that you want to release something to the team or not? So basically, in our proposed workflow right now is that whenever you're working on some, let's say that you already have a project A with version 1.0 in the DevOBR, and you're working on it, and you don't want yet to release it. You just make a commit without bumping the version. It's the most convenient way to do things to do. So what happens, you put your new source code in the SVN, CI picks it up, builds it, tests it. If it's okay, it releases to the DevOBR, or it sends it to the DevOBR. But because we said we don't want to overwrite, I already have the version A1.0.0, and that's I never want to override that, as we said. So this will build. It will give me the feedback whether the build is okay or not. It will run the tests. So this is basically why I checked in. But it will not deploy anything to the DevOBR. The others in the team will not see my changes yet. When I say, okay, I'm done with my work, I know what version I should give. I also have some tool support now for this. Short comment on this tool support. I assume that most of you were also on Neil's talk yesterday, so you know that there is very good tool support to suggest you what the next version should be depending on your changes. Well, in theory, the tool can never give you the correct answer or the final answer, because I think there was also a question yesterday that you may make a change that doesn't change the signature of a particular method, but for example, you change your input, which was a long, but you change it from centimeters to millimeters. And it's something that no tool can grasp out of your code. So this is why we insist on having a manual validation on this version. So the suggestion is great. We welcome this. But we want to, so it's basically also a minimum thing, because the tool will tell you, you at least need to improve, to bump your minor, but maybe you want to bump your major if you have such semantic changes. And then you have the possibility to do this in the tool. So once you bump your version, the CI will detect, and well, everything will go as the same. So you put the sources in your SVN, CI grabs it and builds, tests, and releases. But this time you have a bundle that has the version 1.0.1. So also the DevOBR is very happy to get your new library, put it in there, and at this point in time, you have the old one and the new one. So if you continue working on 1x, then you will build against the 1.0, and you will deploy the 1.0.1, because maybe it contains a bug fix, and that's what you want to achieve. Okay, right, on to the conclusions. Yeah, we like OSGi modularity, basically because...
There's a question here.
Yeah, sure.
Does this imply that every commit leads to a new release or a binary release towards that DevOBR?
It may be towards the DevOBR, but it's not every. So in this case, if you do not bump the bundle version, it will not get put into the DevOBR. It will just be ignored by the DevOBR.
How do you do that? So it means, for example, I have a team with 4 people, 4
Yeah.
developers. We're working on the same project functionality. Can we actually work on our own island and then say, okay, we commit one on each other, and then there is someone who says, I want to have a work in progress commit? How do you achieve that?
So the question is, if all your team members are working on the same projects, it can happen. Well, usually on such a small team, we are also only a team of about 10 people. You know what the other is working on. So you will definitely have some merge at some point. So if you're working on the same thing, you will need to merge your changes with the merges of your colleague.
Yeah, but it could be that you're doing something which can help me.
Yeah,
I'm
sure.
Working on,
Yeah.
Well, we're working on a team.
Yeah.
And the thing of a team is
And
to achieve the same goal.
yeah, the question is then, if I know that you need that, I might make a release to provide you that if I already have it. And that would be something like 101. And I can continue to work on my thing.
So if you have a feature
If
with an iteration of, call it 10 days, so you commit at least daily, I suppose?
well, the other thing is, if you really want to use my work in progress, but I say, well, I'm not really ready. I only want to give these changes to you and not to somebody else. One thing you could do is you could grab the sources. Of course, you must know what you're doing, so you will be linking against my head, against my work in progress. You'll be able to use my changes, and whenever I release it, you'll also have it in the DevOBR. But if the rest of the team will not see something. If only you are interested in my work in progress, then you can always grab this. You have a dependency on my library that I'm working on. You'll just grab the sources, and whenever you grab some sources in your workspace, you always see the head.
And it's important only if you raise the version of your module, it gets stored into the DevOBR.
Yeah.
Because if you just make a commit without changing the sources to share it with your colleague, then we will have this case. You will get bullet, it gets tested, he tries to release it, but the DevOBR will see, I already have this version, so I don't store the new one into the OBR. So I think that's exactly the one.
Actually, it is new version.
No,
Yeah.
Because you built.
Yeah, but
the
it's
binary is different,
yeah.
so actually
but not
it
in
is
the
a new
sense.
version.
Yeah,
Okay,
it-
but not in the sense of OSGi, because we don't bump the package version or the bundle version. So in each package you have the package info, or you have also in the BND file the bundle version. If you don't change this one, that's the one where when we talk about bumping the version. When we don't touch this one and just committing into SVN, then of course you have a different SVN version. But that's not the version we are talking about. We are talking about the OSGi version. If you don't change that one, then these changes won't get stored into the DevOBR. And if you're at the point in your development where you say, okay, now I'm done with this feature, then you can use this diff. The tool will suggest you a new OSGi version. You can take it over, or you can say, now I want to bump it even further higher. So instead of minor, I use major. And then, when you then commit this information, and this information is also source code. It's not just source code, but it's files you're committing to the repository. If the CI now sees that there's a new version, then he will build a new version for the DevOBR, and the DevOBR will say, okay, that's a new version that I will take and put into the OBR. And then every other team member who is accessing the DevOBR can see this new version.
Actually, your DevOBR is something in between a snapshots repository, which will always have the recent changes, and your release repository,
Exactly,
right?
yes.
So
Yeah. It's a bit, well, it will have it might have all the history, so it won't always only have the newest things. So here at the end, once I increase the version, I have two bundles in the repository. I have both 100 and 101.
And it's not a
this
snapshot.
is the case with snapshot repositories as
Yeah,
well,
right.
but you do not have all the changes in
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
That's the thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you have some kind of release cycle within your team
Exactly.
before the real
Yep.
release.
Yes.
Yeah, that's it.
Sure.
Another thing is if you have two team members and changing the same bundle, and then you do a 2-week commit with different changes, how many releases do you do?
Well, you have to merge at some point. So whenever you commit, you
So
should make an update and synchronize with the other and see if the
so
changes.
the second team member needs to make a merge. So if
So-
you checking
The
The first one gets it free.
Yeah.
The second one will have to do a merge.
right.
So yeah, because you're conflicting on the source code level, and then somebody has to say, well, if there's a conflict, somebody will have to say, well, what is to do now? Do I keep my change? Do I keep his change? And then you probably communicate with each other and then solve. It's typical merge problem if it's not an automatical merge.
Oh, okay.
But
so
I think it's no
we
problem with Riscato OSGi. It's the same
Yeah.
as you're doing if
Right.
you're working without OSGi. So the first one who commits, he just can commit it. The second one has to take care of how to merge.
Okay.
And in our case, if he doesn't bump the version to the second one, then his changes wouldn't go into the DevOBR because the version is already in the DevOBR. So he has additionally to raise the version again so that also his changes are going to the DevOBR.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
When you check into SE, you do need to do a merge.
Mhm.
Because earlier I thought you mentioned actually is your if you just commit, we put commit and nobody else can see the change. But when you do another week commit, you have to actually merge
Yes.
into the trunk.
You can always see the changes via the source code repository.
Oh,
So
okay.
if you make an update, you see all the changes. But usually you don't want to poll all the modules which you're not working on. But you want to get the newest modules via during the building or testing. And that you get for free if it's in a DevOBR, because then bndtools or BND in the solving phase is fetching you the newest version you can use according to your specification.
Okay.
Okay.
So there is a typical development scenario that the developers work on their, so to say, own bundles, or is it typically shared between a lot of developers?
We have several developers working on the same parts of the code, so we share in this regard, but as much as we can, we're trying to differentiate this in time, so we don't have too many working at the same time on the same. So we do try to minimize this merging, but it's not like for this part of the code there's only one developer, and we do mix quite a lot.
For me, it looks a bit tailored to that development model. So if you have a repo where a lot of developers work at the same time.
Yeah. We have no large experience on how this would work for such a larger team, and for us, being a 10-people team, we do mix quite a lot, so everybody in the team can get to work on any bundle, basically.
Yeah.
But when we divide the work, we just try to have 2 people working on the same thing, or yeah,
level.
exactly.
And the second question regarding the testing. So maybe I'm wrong, but I have the impression if you do this continuous integration test based on modifications on a dedicated bundle, you test this bundle in isolation.
Yeah.
So we, for example, have a scenario where the next development phase depends on also work in progress from other teams. So this makes it even more relevant that your current snapshot builds against other snapshot versions.
Yeah.
So is this supported
Yes.
by this approach? Because I don't see a central OBR which has the current snapshot version in the latest build. So how does this continuous integration then rely on the latest build results, so to say, from other bundles in a snapshot version which you don't have centrally?
Yeah.
Via the source code repository, what you can do is that you have an additional job in Jenkins or Hudson, where you specify, where you check out all the relevant source codes, and where you mention their version latest, and you're picking up the modules in the head version of the source code, and then you can build it. So through configuring a different Jenkins job, you can achieve that.
But you rely completely on building against the latest source versions of the whole project dependency.
Yes. So otherwise we are using our own commit. So we don't use snapshots versions in all these modules, but we have very fine-grained versions, because every version we are bumping, it's going into the DevOBR. So the DevOBR is a subset of the stuff we are sending to our customers, because there's really many fine-grained steps in it, and only when we need new development for the new deployment for the customer, we are taking then and a version out of it, test it, and give it to the customer. So if in your case, if you're releasing a snapshot and say, okay, that's my current version, then you could go via this approach. It's not exactly the same, that's true, but I think it's similar.
Yeah.
For me, I mean, different, but for me it feels like the whole approach is circled around the lack of a concept for having development artifacts identified in the repository. Because usually when I develop a bundle, I say I have very fixed dependencies, and I only want to go against released artifact versions, then I'm always sure everything works fine.
Mhm.
As soon as I'm in this development mode, I might want to switch one or two other bundles and say, okay, well, for this particular package, I need the latest and greatest version available. Whoever committed that one.
Yeah.
And for that one, I don't care about the version. I just want to grab
Sure.
the latest from a certain branch.
Yeah.
And I think this is the workaround for that.
Well, the question is, how can you do that and also incorporate this handling of versions? Because if I got you right, the way to do this also in our approach would be that the projects where you want to have the latest and greatest are the projects that you grab from the source repository. You're grabbing it, okay. You're grabbing it into your workspace, and everything else that you don't have in your workspace, that you're not currently working on, will be grabbed automatically from the DevOBR remotely. And this is the way that we try to mix what I'm interested in is in the workspace. I'm working on that. I want the latest and greatest. Everything else is what was released for the whole team use. Okay. Well, basically, I only had, I think it was a good point to have the questions because, well, the general thing is, this was one important thing for us, that we kind of felt, okay, right, now we're going to do semantic versioning. Now we'll just go to website, read how it's done, and implement it, and it works. And then starting to work on it, we felt, okay, why is it so hard? Why do we have so many questions that nobody seems to have answered? So we don't believe we're the only ones to have these problems, but then what I felt is missing right now is kind of a default workflow that the OSGi community could suggest and the tooling could support, so that new teams have a faster startup with this with the versions semantics thing. And that's, well, after talking with Peter Kreens and Neil Bartlett, that's a concern, and it is addressed. There was a BND hackathon this year, and it was quite a hot topic there. So there is something happening there, but it's not yet on a release status. It's just the sooner it happens, the better. Yeah. So again, slight disclaimer: everything that we propose here, it's something that is very tailored to our team, to the way that we work. It's by no means something that we would say, well, it works in every environment, and you should do it like this. Because I'm pretty sure that in 1 year, our target workload will also be looking a bit different, depending on what comes additionally, what support comes in the tooling. Yeah, we still have a few features that we need in the tooling to support our workflow. There was, for example, stuff like, how do you access your remote repositories? We are in Siemens, and the Siemens intranet is a pretty large thing. And you're not allowed to serve things simply via HTTP, which was the default thing supported by bndtools to access remote repositories. So we had to build in something like HTTPS with authentication. So all these details that make your work hard, this is something that we implemented, and also is now, I think, is not so well documented, but it's available in bndtools. And well, a couple of such things that still need to be put into the tooling. Right.
Did you also look into a Maven bundle plugin-based workflow?
Yeah. So to Maven is that, well, our initial idea was that we want to use OSGi services. So we want to go into the direction of services. And then we said, okay, if we want to work with OSGi, use the service platform and everything, well, let's try to, so basically we were coming from the services and trying to go to use OSGi modularity to handle this, and wanted to see, okay, is this possible or not? So this is our history, why we're more or less landed on this track. On the other side, we weren't big fans of Maven, let's put it this way. But there are some things about the way OSGi modularity and particularly BND and bndtools that offer us that I know we would miss on Maven. For example, this automatically computed imports from the bytecode. This analysis, it's something that we came to appreciate a lot. And yeah, this is one thing that we know that if we were to go to Maven, we definitely miss.
So I'm not talking about using Tyco.
Okay.
We're talking about using the Maven bundle plugin, which is BND built in as well, so you get generated manifests.
Calculate imports as well.
Yeah, right. So we didn't have a when we started using this, it was a bit more than 1 year ago. It's I think it wasn't, so our estimation there wasn't in the status that we could start working on that. It might be worth revisiting now, if we could also talk a bit about it. And
It's good enough answer to say you don't like Maven, I think.
sorry? Yeah. Yeah, don't want to make it that controversial.
Are there any kinds of dependencies? So, do you define for your solution the entire set of bundles that you want to package up as that solution, or is it kind of a core set and then you use OBR to get the rest of the dependencies?
Yeah, we have initially basically one project, one bundle that we want to deploy, and then you get resolving. Well, with the resolving you also get required dependencies, but you also get optionals. So that's why there's also a manual step there to see, well, which one of these optionals I know I'm going to need. And basically these optionals, once you select them, they also become your required. So there is a small set there. And these options might also grab in something else, but there is a small set, basically a main one and the optionals that we want to have, and then the rest gets pulled in.
So you use OBR to kind of bootstrap the
Yeah.
process of deciding what
Exactly.
you want.
Yeah. That was one of the main things, main requirements.
So I sadly don't have any experience with bndtools, so I don't exactly know how the dependency resolution on the CI server works. And especially you say you're using Untitled files on the CI server. Do these require any maintenance, or is the dependency resolution somehow done?
It doesn't require maintenance because all the linking that we're doing to the repositories is done now via HTTPS. So everything so a user would, a developer in his workspace would make the resolving. Why we wanted, it would be possible to do the resolving on server too. But as you said, we want a manual step in the resolving because of the optional dependencies and things that we might still put in there. And the result of this manual validation is a file that also gets written into the automatically generated, and it's put on the CI, and the CI just grabs the generated list and just zips it together, just puts everything together.
There's an end task which then uses the list and creates these subfiles.
So we needed to create this end task. It wasn't default in bndtools, but it's something that is general for all our projects.
But this generated list that was
Yeah,
missing.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
That's this creation of the list is part of bndtools. You can do it with bndtools.
Yeah.
I'm afraid we're out of time now.
Okay.
So, thanks Marian and Dieter.